what I learned is that it's really hard to sit in a chair of a president or CEO of a company and please all stakeholders. You have to balance what is the needs of your customer, your employee, your shareholder, whoever those people are, how important it really is to be the leader you want your company's leaders to be. I will say single-handedly, it's what I will credit for allowing me to propel in my career.
Welcome to the Sinclair podcast, where we share real-world experiences, wisdom, and the honest struggles of entrepreneurs to help you navigate and scale your business with confidence. Ashley, I appreciate you coming on today. I can't even do the math. What do we go back, like almost 20 years?
Yeah, at least that, Chris. We've kind of grown up together, haven't we?
I know. It's funny because most of my network it was built in the branded merchandise world because there's so many friggin' awesome people, and you're one of those. And I just think you've got such a great story. We spent a lot of time together in the industry, and you're there now in a different way. But why don't you take me back to give us a little bit of context? Like, where'd you grow up? Tell us a little bit about early days for Ashley.
Yeah, it's a fun story, actually. I grew up very middle class, went to the little tiny Catholic school and, great family. I'm the oldest of five, actually. Oldest of five.
Wow.
One of my brothers passed away when he was little, but he still counts. And, really as the oldest and honestly going through having a brother die, I grew up really fast, right? I was in third grade and had to all of a sudden start making dinner for my family. And, my parents both worked, but losing someone in your family kind of devastated the situation. So I would say I've always been on the mature side. I always joke that when, the catalog would come out to what do you want for Christmas? If you remember, you used to get to circle the wish list catalogs.
Yeah. There's the Sears one for us.
Yeah, we had Sears and Penny. I would always circle the Office kit, and I would want to play Office when I was a kid,
Come on.
It was a journey, but my first job was at Office Max. I worked in office supplies, so you just can't get away from it.
You were bound to make your way to this industry.
Yeah, exactly. So interestingly enough, I would say I grew up very average. I was that kid in school that was never the straight A student, and I actually was never really the athlete. I can remember thinking in eighth grade, going home and just being I kind of think I have no talents. God must have forgot about me. What am I good at? I didn't have anything that really jumped out in the world of school and academics that made me feel like I was that superstar. And it took entering the business world. It actually took my first job at Office Max, where I was 16 years old and started at the copy center back when people still made copies of everything.
Yes.
And it was there that I realized, whoa, I love this. I'm good at working. And, I'm getting promoted at 16 to close the store at night. And they're like, just don't tell anybody you're not 18 yet, So it was that leap from what kids go through growing up in school and sports and friends to working that allowed me to see, wait, I have some pretty interesting talents here.
Yeah, and I mean, the first thing I thought of was, and by the way, you didn't realize you're in grade 3 making dinner and helping raise 4 other kids in your family alongside your parents. But again, we don't realize these things at the time.
Right. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Exactly.
So then tell me about post-secondary. Where'd you go? What'd you pick and why?
So I went to actually local college. Interesting story. My parents, I was only 17 when I graduated high school. And so they would not let me go away to school my first year. And I ended up going to a local SIU, Edwardsville University, started there, business admin, and then was going to go away my second year. But I met who is now my husband of 23 or 22 years, my December of my freshman year. So once I met him, then I didn't want to move away and leave.
Wow, that's awesome.
Got a degree in business administration and marketing and really didn't know what that meant. I was working at the time at the Gap as assistant manager at one of the stores, doing merchandising in the stores. And I'm like, okay, I got this degree. I don't really know what to do with it. And it was applying. My first job out of college I applied for was a company called Gateway CDI. in the promotional products industry. And I truly was like, wasn't exactly sure what that was. They don't talk about.
I was just going to say, did you have any idea?
No.
You probably thought, what, marketing company, some sort of agency?
Exactly. And I grew up, so my dad was in the office supply industry, like my whole life growing up. He worked for a company called Fellows Manufacturing out of Chicago.
Okay.
A very awesome family-owned big business. And so I knew office supplies, and we would always get the freebies home, but I had no idea promotional products was a thing. Like, no.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what was your first role at Gateway?
So I worked under Conrad Franey. He was the part owner and head of kind of sales and marketing. And I was a marketing associate, like literally sat outside of Chuck and Conrad. Chuck also owned the business, sat outside their offices and completed RFPs and supported the sales reps and what they needed help with. And I will say single-handedly, it's what I will credit for allowing me to propel in my career, because I've always been someone that was raised to pay attention, that would listen, that would be ensure that you were pinging, right? And so sitting outside of their offices, even if the doors were closed, you heard everything. You knew everything. And it was very good for me to really start understanding the ins and outs of that business and the people that were winning and succeeding and the ones that weren't, and just say, what are they doing or what aren't they doing, and allow that to help me build my skills and my approach and things.
When you look back to those first few years, or as you grew within the Gateway CDI family, what were a couple of the big takeaways from either a leadership style or just like big things that you will never forget?
Great question. So when I think a few key things, it's always the ones you shouldn't repeat that jump out at you first. You're like, well, I probably shouldn't say that, but
we could censor if need be. But
what's that?
I said we can censor it out if we need to.
No. I would say that, the importance of the client and ensuring that you're taking care of the client, that you're ultimately always a client-centric, client-first company is one of the really big key takeaways, even throughout, my Facilis days as well. I will say that, in all truth, another takeaway, and it actually is something that I learned from maybe what wasn't happening, is how important when you're a leader is that you truly are leading what you want that company to be, and culture, and how important it is to not have, individuals hear one thing from you and something different from somebody else. How important it is that if you want to have even as simple as a Halloween costume contest at work, you don't sign off on it and not participate. You get in there and you actually lead. And even if you don't have time, you make the time. And I would say that, throughout my life, I've had leaders that have done either, and how important it really is to be the leader you want your company's leaders to be.
Yeah, it's great advice. And it's great because I have the pleasure of, knowing Chuck for a long time, and, having a more in my life now than ever before, which is great. And Conrad, just again, another incredible leader and human. Yeah. So, I think you were surrounded by amazing people to mentor and watch.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you learn, and they have been great leaders, and I've had quite a few leaders over the days, but you learn what to do and what not to, kind of like parenting. Like from your parents, you learned what you wanted to do, or maybe you didn't want to do. And I feel like leadership's been the same way for me.
For sure. And even, I can speak to my journey. It's like looking back, you can see a lot of things. It's like, wow, I wouldn't do that again. I've really, I've evolved this piece. And I think that's the part of it. It's like, we're all perfectly imperfect and trying to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. It goes back to the whole story of, figuring it out, what balls in your life are glass and what are rubber, and what can be dropped and what shouldn't be dropped, and making sure that every part of your life has those balls, and knowing and identifying that, when you can let yourself off the hook, when you can let individuals off the hook, when do you need to be more present for your family, and that constant balance we're trying to make is something that I feel like I've learned the hard way, but had to learn pretty early on because I was always very success and career driven.
Yeah, I want to pin that and go back to it because I've got a couple questions to drill down on that. So let's go from Gateway then. Chuck is involved in Facilis. So Gateway, for those that don't know, it's a distributor of promotional products. And you guys were really focused on large enterprise, e-com stores versus dropship. So again, for those that don't know the industry, they're kind of going blah, blah, blah. But then the involvement with Facilis Group really starts to, at some point bring you over. And as that scales, it takes Chuck away from Gateway. So talk about that and your journey, which is how many years with Facilis?
So 16 years with Facilis. I will tell you that I feel very fortunate to have been in the exact right place at the right time, in the sense that I was in a hybrid marketing sales role for Gateway when Chuck met the founders of Facilis, which was a completely different company, Panda. And I happened to be the one that thought the technology was amazing and cool, and I had a knack for it, and I loved the sophistication. And I said and told them, hey, let me help the salespeople on board in this new system. And it was that kind of opportunity that led me to then, okay, you're doing this fantastically. You know what? Would you consider being our sales team manager and lead the sales team? Because a lot of it needed to be process driven. And so I was given that opportunity at Gateway, which was phenomenal. And then once we were ready, Facilis became Facilis Group, we were ready to start trying to sell this to other distributors in the US. I was the one that knew the system. I was the one that inside and out had trained our team on it. So I went and implemented the first Facilis US partner in Minnesota, and went and really trained them on how to use the system in their business. And so it became natural that as Facilis started to actually grow, Gateway was still paying me for a while, but with Facilis growing, I was getting more and more involved in that area. And it was after I had my first child that I had to put somebody and train them in my place to run Gateway. And when I came back, I said, she's doing an awesome job. Let me focus on Facilis. Let me work to sell Facilis, to build the training for Facilis, to take us to the next level. And it was the opportunity to really, from a ground up company, all three of the owners had promotional distributors and a tech company. And so while the tech company was their fun project, it wasn't their family's future in finance. And so they were very willing, when they had this young, eager person who's like, well, let me do that. And I'm going to build training. And you know what? We needed somebody to run finance. Okay, fine. I'll figure it out. And it was truly like, by us being so small and me being the first account manager, the first training manager, the head of finance, the head of marketing, all of these things that I had just jumped in and figured out, that really propelled me to grow and to evolve in my career. I'll never forget the day that I knew that Chuck, Dan, and Martin had been talking about selling. I was kind of their number two. I was their head of ops, their head of marketing, really overseeing a lot of the business. And it was Chuck who, it's interesting because each of them amazing guys. And I learned so much. For
sure. Great
from
friends.
Dan, Martin, and Chuck, and different things. They're very different people for anybody that knows them. But it was Chuck who took me out to dinner and said to me, what do you see your future as? And I said, well, the technology side's interesting. The operations side's interesting. If you guys would leave, maybe I could step into Dan's role. And he looked at me and he goes, why wouldn't you want to be the president of this company? He goes, I believe in you. I think you are the perfect candidate for it. And it was that push to say, why wouldn't I? You're right. And it's interesting as you go through that transition, right? Because 2018, we're going through mass due diligence. And for anyone that's ever sold a company, it's a lot of work because we were going from privately held to private equity. So there was a lot of due diligence questions. I would be on the phone and spend hours on conference calls with individuals from the UK who all had different accents. And I'm sitting there just trying to concentrate. And it was all new to me. Oh my gosh, I didn't know how.
Trying to understand what they're saying and then what they're actually saying.
Yeah, I'm like, my husband used to laugh at me because it was for about 6 months in there. If a TV show came on with like British accents, I was like, turn it off. But,
please don't.
I can say I interpret it well now. But it was that year where he really believed in me and then groomed me to take over. And then they sold in end of 2018. I was the unnamed president. Chuck was still involved, but he was transitioning everything to me. And then our private equity company and our parent company, Pebble, decided, well, let's take the company public. So we did a whole nother year of due diligence and all that comes with it to go from being that private company to a publicly traded company. And then myself announced as formally president to the whole industry, all of our clients, on January of 2020.
Wow. And what an experience, though, to see. And again, I know very little, through friends or colleagues that have gone through, the private equity experience. I know a little, but to see just the differences in the experience from private equity to then going to the public side, like what an amazing learning experience for you.
I will tell you, it was a crash course in business 401, I guess you call it.
That's awesome. So then, and this was my last time in Vegas. So our industry has the big conference every year, and Facilis, always does a great bash, and it's a great gathering. And I mean, they're pillars and companies doing that. I mean, it's community, it's technology, and sort of the buying group piece. But I'll never forget 2020 Vegas, the announcement, the excitement. It's you making your mark on this, and fast forward. Less than 2 months probably, and COVID hits.
Yeah, COVID hit. I was
Sorry,
talking about
a little PTSD here for you. Exactly.
Yeah,
Take me through maybe some of the, your experience with that, and what were some of the most challenging things for you? Because I think everyone has that, their story of how it impacted them, their families, their business. It was a really, really challenging time.
It was definitely a really challenging time. And I think we were all in denial at first, right? We all started in denial. And then we quickly realized that, this is going to affect people more than we ever thought. And it was then that really we as a team decided all we can do is be there for our clients right now. So we quickly created opportunities for people to connect. It's when we launched cohorts, the cohort program that brought smaller groups together and let them lean on each other. The other thing that I will say, it was, around this time as well, that I had started being introduced to scaling up. And one of the biggest takeaways for me throughout my time during COVID and managing the consistent emotional highs and lows. I mean, you went from being a company leader to therapist overnight. And, everybody felt a different way about what became a very politically charged healthcare crisis in our country, or health crisis in our country. And so one of the biggest takeaways I still have from that time is that we intentionally just reached out to be there for people. And it was through doing that I feel that we had the most success as a company, because without that ability to understand and listen, suppliers' businesses stopped overnight, distributors' businesses stopped overnight. And so we just started calling people. How are you? What's your challenge? What are you seeing right now? And it was through that our industry is so resilient, and the people in our industry who shifted to quickly sell PPE, because especially in the US, there wasn't enough protective equipment and masks and sourcing hand sanitizers and even trash cans. We had clients who, guess what? Nobody needed something with a logo on it, but they knew how to find product. And so they quickly started pivoting, and through us having discussions with, those very high A charge clients that were sourcing for their clients, we were able to tell other clients who were kind of like literally depressed and comatose.
Yeah, hey, floating in the wind.
Have you talked to your clients about masks? And then we would start brokering sanitizer. We would call suppliers and be like, do you have hand sanitizer? Can we pre-purchase 1 million units and hold them for Facilis? And it was, I think, really through talking through all of those pieces that allowed Facilis Group at the end of that year to actually be up. And that was just unheard of, right? The clients across Facilis Group were up, and when everyone else was a double-digit down year.
No one would have taken that bet in the March, early April 2020. Nobody.
No, not at all. I can remember I was on the phone with Tim Andrews, president of ASI, great guy. He's been an awesome friend and mentor to me. And this just first started happening, and I'm like, I think we'll be back to normal by May. And he's like, probably summer, Ashley. Little did we know our little glass half full side of things wasn't going to come true. But
yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, you had the polarities, because on the on the US side within, the Facilis community, which is, call it maybe 150 partners US, 25, 30 on Canadian. It's we're watching over the fence going, we can't, we can't sell it. The demand's not here. Healthcare is not privatized. So it was hard time. So I imagine you had to deal with all of that, saying, well, that's not fair that they're getting support and we're not being helped and we're feeling left out. And I mean, it was again, I try not to go back too often, but I can only imagine the challenges. Real quick, before we move on from that, was there anything, looking back, not a regret, anything you would have done different from a leadership style, or maybe a lesson that you really learned through that experience?
So I guess first I'll say I wouldn't change 1 minute of it. It was supercharged training for me as a leader, because, talk about everything changes on a dime. Everybody's working you couldn't throw more catastrophe at someone and say, figure out how to lead through this, I don't think, than what COVID did at that time for business. And so I don't regret it. I think it made me 10 times more resilient of a person and a leader. I will say what I wish I would have done different is embraced it and started talking to people sooner. I feel like I was a bit paralyzed in the beginning, thinking, well, what do we do? How do we act? Who do we talk to? And I should have done more earlier on and pulling our teams together and pulling our clients together. It took too long, but again, you didn't know what you didn't know. But I would say my lesson learned is that picking up the phone, which is the lesson of every conflict and every trial, is the number one way. God forbid something happens again, I would be on 24-hour calls.
Yeah, I mean, people just needed that connection.
Yeah, they really did. They needed a friend.
Yeah, I appreciate sharing that, Ashley. So let's talk about strategic coach. Hang on, I'm going to go back before that. You now have branched out, you have your own company, built something really special, and I'll say, quite substantial in a very short amount of time, which I want you to talk about. But at what point did you start to have the feelings of either like this role or this lifestyle or this corporate world isn't for me, and I gotta do something else. I gotta do something for me. Can you remember either a moment or maybe the buildup of what really drove you to go do your own thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll say that, again, I don't look back and think I would change one day of my career. Like one day that I was there, what I learned, the experiences I had from, speaking and doing an investor's fireside chat to flying over to the UK and meeting with investors face to face to, financially, what the financials and the aspects of what you have to look at from a perspective of KPIs, but more importantly, cash conversion rates and your cycles of turn. And the education was just immense. I will say that I have a passion for what is so amazing about business. And what I learned is that it's really hard to sit in a chair of a president or CEO of a company and please all stakeholders. And I didn't have it in me to put a stakeholder to the side and focus on one or two of the three stakeholders I had. And I don't know if that's just how Ashley's driven. I don't know if it's because I was an OG like Facilis and I knew our partners and in all business, you have to balance what is the needs of your customer, your employee, your shareholder, whoever those people are. And I just didn't feel for me that the push and pull that was consistent was sustainable. And I say that with the utmost respect and love for Facilis, for the Pebble Group, for our shareholders. I think it's a great company and what they're trying to do, I understand it. But for me, the internal conflict was not something I could anymore overcome. And it started, I was president there for over 4 years. It started fantastic. We had some great success and some great wins, and the company's still doing well. But for Ashley personally, it started to take a toll on my health and my family. And I've always felt like my career in leadership, my career as president and CEO, my career of where I was was my stepping stone and not my final. And I mean, I've been talking since I was probably 25 years old, and I hired my first keynote speaker. I'm like, they make what? That's all they do? Huh? I'm
Hold
like,
on.
okay, that's my vision for my future. And in all truth, it was
Cool.
planning events early on that I'm like,
Yeah.
I can do that. I will tell you that it was also interesting. And I went through a very, very life-changing experience in leadership when I took over Facilis, because truly as number two, I was doing a lot of work. I was doing, I had a significant amount of knowledge, and I would never discount what the leaders of Facilis Group were doing prior to our sale. But I always thought, I'm doing the job already. Why wouldn't I succeed at it? Well, two things happen. One, you take the protection or the wall of everybody going to the leader first, and now everybody comes at you. And that was a big awakening for me. And then the second thing was that Chuck, Dan, and Martin left. And so I all of a sudden had some amazing people around me that had helped us get to a certain point. But I was left with very few leaders that could take us to that next level. And that was an eye-opening experience that I didn't expect to be hit with. And what I will share is that it was actually the hiring of my COO at Facilis who really helped evolve me to a whole new level. He came from a $4 billion organization. Talk about imposter syndrome. I would sit in meetings with him and I'm like, oh my God, this guy could do my job in circles. Like, he is so much smarter than I am. And it was a very amazing experience for me to not only realize that while he maybe had the business acumen or the MBA speak down, he didn't want to stand in front of people. And he had skills that I didn't, but I had skills that he didn't. And so that was a really amazing realization, and something that, I preach to everyone that will listen. Do not be afraid to hire people smarter than you, because it's that fear or that need to be the number one on top that holds companies back. And when I brought him in, it did two things. One, it helped me take my strengths and make them superpowers, because I wasn't having to build up my weaknesses because I had somebody that was handling those things.
Yeah.
And other thing he did was he introduced me to Scaling Up. And so Scaling Up is a program that's been created by Vern Harnish. People have probably heard of EOS or Scaling Up. From everything I know, Gino, who was the founder of EOS, and Vern used to be buddies, and they had a program together, and then they got divorced, and then we have two kids. So
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
It's interesting, right? So Scaling Up, he used it in his past business, brought it in, and I ended up really investing deep and thinking, you know what, we could potentially use this as a tool with our clients, and then decided that I could use those tools to take everything that I feel I'm very talented at and know from a leadership perspective and people and seeing things, and then layer the tools on top, and then really be able to go out and work with companies, which was the way Exec Coach was born, is to say, okay, I'm going to work with companies and I'm going to help them not only see the people side, the emotional side, what people tend to ignore. And I'm going to layer that with actual tools that will help them grow. And that's how I started the company. That's how I really took the risk. And let me tell you, it was scary. It was definitely something that I had always said, well, when I hit 50, I don't know why 50 was the magic number, but when I hit 50, I was going to look to start this next chapter. And I did it lots of years sooner. I'm sure you can tell.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I probably talked too long, but that kind of is.
No, that's great. It gives context to that. And do me a favor, like, share an example of one of the tools, because again, spending a lot of time and being a part of the Exec Coach team. And again, I've been able to learn so much from you and from some of the tools you're implementing. I mean, the one that comes to mind is the 1% tool. Do you want to share that one? And again, it's a little thing that you can implement and have such a big impact.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And Scaling Up is built around really 5 key principles. It's core, people, strategy, execution, and cash. The 1% tool is a cash tool. And we all know the number one rule of business: you can't run out of cash. That doesn't work.
Yes, very true.
But what the 1% tool does is it really analyzes your financial picture. And it says, if you can move, it's called the power of one, actually. If you can move key metrics within your business. Example, if you can lower your receivable days by 1 day, if you can turn your inventory in 1 day quicker, if you can improve your margins by 1%, the power it has to your bottom line is immense. And so, I just did one of these with a client not that long ago. And by looking at gross profit margin, looking at AR, AP, and I think their inventory days as well, their inventory buys, we were slowing that just by 2 days. They were able to add an additional like $1 million to their bottom line and the value of what their business is. Because everybody, whether they're trying to sell or evolve, is looking at their valuation. And these are, it's the power of small numbers. And I have another client who we focused on margin last year, and people griped and they thought, no, we're going to lose clients. They improved their margin by 2.5%. Like you would have to grow your revenue by 10 to add that to the bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. It's not to downplay, but some simple tools, but that can have such a big impact. So again, it's been so cool to be able to learn and watch some of these from you and things you're implementing. I asked you this before, but you're 8 months into this business? In your first year still?
Yeah, we're in the first year still. We launched officially April 1.
Did you think you'd be where you are today?
I didn't. I will tell you that my goal leaving the end of, in the first year was to have a few solid clients of my own. I had always I love building teams and I love working with people. And I will say that, that was my biggest fear, is that I had at Facilis had such an amazing group of people and I didn't want to be alone. And I had always said, well, let me get my business running. And then once the timing is right, I would love to bring a couple coaches in so that we can collaborate and work together. And it was actually Chuck Vandos that came to me and he's like, I want to work with you. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll figure out how to build the coaching element sooner.
Sure.
And now we have 8 coaches at Exec to Coach. And we're talking about people that have been CROs and CEOs and CTOs in their fields that, honestly, I'm intimidated by half of them. I'm like, well, why do you want to work with me? No, I joke. But it's, as I look at where I am today, I guess I'm not really surprised because I'm not willing to settle and I'm going to keep driving and pushing. I also feel very blessed. I feel like, I have a faith in God, and I believe that He also allowed me to see that it was time to go when it was time to go. And I feel very blessed that I am here with, a great client list that I have on my own, and great clients we have at Exec to Coach, amazing coaches that are all just really excited to get back. But the sky's the limit, right? And I will tell you, Exec to Coach has a very, very specific meaning in its name. And it is that, when I was this young leader and even in head of marketing and then a head of ops, and I must have gotten 10 phone calls a month of people who wanted to coach me. But they've never made the hard decisions. They never were executives. They read a book and they thought that by reading that book or by studying that skill, they were qualified to try to get business and go out and coach other individuals. And so when I started Exec to Coach on my own, it was, I am an executive that is coaching individuals, and you are an executive that needs a coach. And so I was very, very intentional in the meaning of that company. And when I looked at, adding a few people to the team, which again, I'm so proud that we have 8 amazing coaches, it's very important to me that each one of them is an executive. They had to have made hard decisions. They had to have known that, we might be eating ramen. We didn't get a bonus this year. I've had to fire and lay off 20 people because it was COVID, right? And to me, you can't be someone going out there giving advice or supporting individuals when you can't empathize with what they've been through.
Yeah, it's so true. I really appreciate sharing that resilience, that experience. It's again, not to ever discredit people that are certified coaches that get in and are really good at that, but that experience, I think, just carries so much street cred or whatever you want to call it. I think it's pretty cool. What are you in the call it first year and working with a lot of clients already? What's the most challenging part for you individually?
For me,
What other frustrates you or really just is hard to do in the job right now?
so I would say that, I do a lot of family business, and there's a lot of family dynamics in there. And so one of the more difficult or challenging things is just in helping them navigate the ideas. I used to always joke, and if Dan were on, I'd tell him, but I would basically just say my job at Facilis is to convince each one of the leaders that it was their idea with me first, and then I'll bring it together to them and they'll all be happy about it, right?
Yeah.
And so little did I know how great of practice that was to where I am today, because, when you're working with people's businesses, it's personal, it's real, it's raw. They really are eating ramen for dinner if things fail. And so keeping that in mind, I respect all individuals in a company, but I don't have the emotion because I didn't hire that person and I didn't meet their children. And so the hardest part is when someone really needs to move on from a leader or they've outgrown people, and trying to help them see that while balancing the emotional side of it, because people's the hardest part. At the end of the day, you can put a power of one story together. We can put together the best goals, but if you don't have the right people in the right seats, you're not going to be able to do what you need to do.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that, not having that financial connection, first of all, like that piece, and then not having the emotional connection. I mean, you're there to support emotionally and help people out. But I think when those two things are pulled out, you can just be more objective, maybe more curious, and just more honest. Say, listen, this is my experience, or this is my opinion, and whether you like to hear it or not, I think it's easier on your side, or in my experience in coaching I've done, and you can do it with love.
You can do it with love. And I always say, you don't pay me to hear what you want to hear. And that's usually when they're like, all right, this is going to be bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What are we in for?
Let me just remind you, you don't pay me to be told what you want. Yeah, exactly.
That's exciting. I love it. What are you most excited about looking ahead the next couple of years?
Okay, so I will tell you, Chris, I am ecstatic about a brand new program we just are launching. It's like you'd set me up for this.
Teed it right up.
So I will tell you, I joined YPO back in, 2002 maybe. And it was a phenomenal experience. And it was, it was mainly social, but the biggest part that really helped me propel was the forum, the confidential group of peers. There was 8 of us in a room that met every month that talked about our problems in our business from a high level. It was not about giving advice. It was about supporting and experience sharing. And what the accelerator program is basically I am taking the combination of that experience that I know you had a similar one with EO.
Yeah, absolutely. Still a part of a group.
Are you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible. Life-changing.
And I'm taking that and turning it into like a trifecta. It's a 3-part program. It's not only do you have your forum with your monthly meetings that are moderated, you don't have to worry about running. And then we're also introducing coaching, business planning. So you'll have your personal coach. And then we're also including training for your emerging leaders, right? Everybody has people in their company they want to invest in, and people are spending a lot of money and time to drive sometimes even conflicting messages in their organization. And so this program is all 3 of those run by the different coaches across Exec to Coach. And it's allowing not only distributors, but we're bringing in suppliers, we're bringing in manufacturing reps, we're bringing in service providers, we're bringing in companies that are non-competing that you can sit on a call or a room with and have that forum, that confidential time, on top of then all the coaching and the expertise and the valuation and the Power of One tools and the face tools and all the things that are a part of scaling up. Anyway, I'm super excited about it, if you can't tell, because I think
that's awesome.
Exactly
I love
what
it.
people need.
Well, and I can speak to the, knowing what you put into this program, and it will be a huge success. And that comes from my experience in EL and Forum. And I mean, just to have that place where you can, when confidentiality is at the utmost, and especially when rapport is built over time, it's just a safe place to go and talk. And in my experience, a lot of times the business stuff was what came forth, but it was layers underneath, which ended up being personal. That was, I'm the reason this is repeating, or this is, causing this to happen within the team, or personal relations, whatever that is. It's generally us that's getting in the way, or or a belief system or a habit. So it's so powerful, and I encourage anyone that isn't a part of one of those groups, get involved because it's amazing. So
Head to Exec to Coach and just look. Here's a shameless plug. Look
well,
up.
that's my last question. You just ripped out my last question. Is how do we find you, Ashley?
So Ashley at Exec to Coach is actually my email, EXECTO Coach. We have a website. Again, a lot of amazing coaches in our company right now that are working with different companies. My client list is full. I'm getting ready to start some accelerator programs, but we would love to talk to anybody that's interested, whether you need to look at your people, look at your structure, whether you're trying to, get your business positioned to sell, or you're trying to turn it over to the next generation, right? We are not that cookie cutter organization, and there's some amazing companies out there, but we are going to go in and understand where you're at as a company and build plans with you to help you get to that next level of where you want to be.
Amazing. I love it, Ashley. Again, I am so proud of what you've done, what you've accomplished with your new company. And just, again, it's a leap of faith. You now carry the beautiful, amazing moments and the really hard, the only one you can blame is you moments, but I think you'll never go back. And I know I feel the same.
Well, thank you. You have been an amazing friend. And let me say congratulations to you too on your big, new, exciting announcement.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's this, a next chapter of an evolution for me, and how I need to show up different and lead different, and I'm really excited for that. So I appreciate it.
If you need
Again, thanks for your friendship.
let me know.
Yeah, I need it. Yeah, exactly. I need several coaches. I got a few therapists and some other people on speed dial. So
We all friends.
I love it. Ashley, thanks so much for your time. I love your story. I'm really excited to continue to watch your journey, and we'll make sure we have in the show notes links to your site and material and content so people can follow along and hopefully reach out and find out what they're missing.
Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate you.
Awesome. You too. Thanks, Ash.